The title of this video is Academic Publishing Issues. Now, the reason I'm talking about academic publishing issues is because you need to be aware of how the industry works, the stakeholders in that industry, some of the tensions in that industry, and where things have gone and where things are going. Now, I told you in a previous video that first impressions matter. Well, second impressions also matter. As an engineer, you need to be continually reading. It doesn't stop when you leave university. You read more things to build better things. You need to give the impression that you're up to date. It can't just be your interview convinces an employer to take you on. You've got to convince them that they want to keep you on. You need to show them that you're up to date, that you're informed, professional, you've got a good reputation, that you're able to come up with novel ideas, that you're able to find gaps. Those things matter. But at the same time, you really need to take care in what you read. And you need to understand the issues with academic publishing. Now, academic publishing, as you're probably aware, takes the work that engineering academics publish and puts it somewhere in written form, but largely on the internet. Academic institutions that are paid by taxpayers, engineering academics, are writing things. They're giving them to the academic publishers, who are private businesses, and the engineering academics are reviewing the work as well. Academics are writing, the academics are reviewing. And that costs the academic publishers nothing. Then the publishers sell that work back to the academics. This is how the cycle looks. Well, in this case, the engineering academics are the readers. The readers produce the work, the publishers give back to the readers to review the work, they then accept the work. The publishers then produce that work and negotiate with libraries who buy the work back off publishers, and then the libraries provide that work back to the academics. There's also a step in the middle where aggregators can pull lots of work from lots of different publishers and bundle it and so forth in packages for libraries, but I'm not going to talk about aggregators. There's a number of issues in this system that you need to be aware of. Governments are heavily subsidising publishing companies. Publishers do not pay for academics to produce the work. In fact, academics will pay article processing charges for publishers to accept their work. And publishers have kind of got a lock on the system, and they've just been able to put the price up and up and up. And publishers have increased the prices past the point now where even the richest libraries are willing to pay. So the University of California, at some point, their library said, we're not doing this anymore. And University of California researchers produce 10% of the publications in the US, which is extraordinary. I haven't followed exactly what they're doing about that, how they're getting around that, but it's an interesting story to follow. It's an issue because publication is currency for researchers. The more you publish in the higher quality journals, the more you can progress. So academics have an incentive to leave the publishing companies alone. It's also an issue that reviewers are secret. Nobody knows the reviewers. That has some drawbacks as well that I'll discuss. And as I've said in the past, negative results are pretty much unpublishable, even though it's valuable to the taxpayer that if somebody does a large experiment and spends millions of dollars, that other taxpayers don't then pay for the same experiment to be done. It's a waste of money when failure is not published, even though it can look bad. So let's look through some of those issues in more detail. Governments are paying for academics to produce the raw product. They're producers. They also provide the quality assurance, and that's at zero cost to the publishing companies. Governments then pay for the libraries to buy the content back from the publishing companies. So the governments are essentially paying for the raw product and then paying for the processed product as well. The publishing companies then lock this content up behind paywalls. Governments are not happy about this, and many of them have signed up to a model called FAIR, which stands for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable and Reusable. The Australian government's done it, and a number of other countries have done it. So they're trying to move slowly in that direction. But publishing companies have been around for a long time. They certainly have their value. They've certainly made a contribution. And it's a tricky thing to stamp a model like this in an international arena. Let's look at publisher pricing in a little bit more detail. This graph's old. It stops in 2010. But you can see just in 15 years how the percentages went up way above inflation. So publishers were just in a position where they were able to turn the dials up pretty much without limit. As I said, University of California subscriptions to Elsevier, they just saw them as too much. They were $10 million a year. And so at some point they went, no, we're doing something different. The relationship between academia and publishing is going to continue to evolve. Let's talk about publication as academic currency. An academic should be more than just what they publish in journals, in engineering journals. There's patents, there's grants, there's other contributions that they make, and a really important one is peer review that just goes unrecognised, and so many people contribute so many hours in reviewing other people's work. And there's also editorial work. There's broader engagement with society, speaking to the community, working with consumer groups, government, industry, working with the media. There's so much more than just this narrow focus on H-index and related metrics and impact factor. These things, they really narrow your vision. It's a real problem, and it's just the way the system has evolved over time. There are broader metrics out there, but at the moment, the focus is still pretty much in the one direction. It's one-dimensional and it has issues. As I said, there's also a problem with reviewer secrecy. Now, say there's two engineers, one's at University A, one's at University B. They're both in a very unique field. They're both competing for a grant. They both need to demonstrate that they're publishing in order to get the grant. Reviewer A submits a paper to a journal. As I said, there's a problem with reviewers. Two engineering academics, one at University A, one at University B. They're competing for money through grants. Academic A submits papers. The papers can really only be evaluated properly by reviewer B. Well, they're in a bit of a pickle. There's suddenly a tension between reviewing a paper, being independent, and being in this competition for money. There's a massive conflict of interest. In addition, reviewers know that their role is to reject papers, to be really tough, to find gaps, to be really critical. Without putting your name on your review, you can basically pick holes in it, misunderstand things. You don't have to be really rigorous in terms of people understanding that your name's on a review. And the editors of the journal don't know if you've actually gone to the trouble of really replicating, validating, and verifying the results. They have to take your word for it. And finally, reviewers don't really contribute to the paper. The focus is more on finding the holes rather than actually adding value. It's a similar problem with software engineers and software testers. The software engineers want the testers to actually improve the product, not just find the holes in the product. Again, there's a problem with publishing negative results. As I said in the past, early career researchers cannot really publish negative results because it's a career limiting move, as the diagram shows. Who wants to publish that they're a failure? Who wants to waste taxpayer money? How is "I failed" going to be a headline? Thomas Edison said, "I found 10,000 ways that don't work," when he was talking about the light bulb. But he could afford to fail. When you're an early career researcher and you're starting out, you actually can't. So it creates disincentives in the system to publish failure. So the big problems in academia, and these problems are here, they're going to be here with us for decades, are paywalls. The government's paying for the work to be produced, the work then gets locked behind a paywall, so society doesn't benefit from it. The quality of the work, papers aren't properly evaluated, the results aren't reinterpreted, the data isn't recalculated, the experiments aren't rerun. There's been studies to show that when they actually do try to replicate work, they don't get the same results in a lot of areas. So there's a lot of really big problems. All of this boils down to job security, job insecurity, in fact, for beginners, because the pressure is actually really high. It's really tough, which is why I focused previously on writer well-being, because it's not just about the writing. Once you've produced that writing, it has to go somewhere into this big bucket of complicated, conflicted, metric-laden system. It's a difficult space to be in. And simply put, there's too many students and not enough jobs. And that means more competition. The more students, the less jobs, the greater power on the demand side. The more pressure, the more competition, the higher publication, the better. And this system then self-reinforces itself. It can be really difficult. So let's look at Elsevier again. I've just picked on Elsevier because it's one of the major publishing houses. There are 5 or 6 big ones. Feel free to look at other ones. But let's talk about money. In 2018, they made almost £1 billion profit, 37%, which is way higher than many other businesses. The total yearly downloads amount to more than 1 billion articles. There are more than 470,000 articles in 25,000 journals. I mean, it is astonishing the scale and the scope of these publishing houses. Okay, it is a massive business, but yet they're making an absolute fortune, and really the governments and society are paying for it. Now, a little bit of resistance has been put up, admittedly, by academics. In 2012, a mathematician, very respectable mathematician, Timothy Gowers, publicly announced a boycott of Elsevier, and a site called The Cost of Knowledge was created with an online petition, and it's been signed by many thousands of academics. And look at that, it had over 17,000 in November 2018, but during 18, academics submitted over 1.8 million research papers to Elsevier-based publication. So, despite objections, the big business continues.